There's a number that decides more industrial real estate deals than any appraisal, any inspection, any lawyer's opinion ever will. It's 4 characters long. It usually has a % sign after it. And most people who use it every single day couldn't tell you with real precision how it's actually built. That number is the cap rate. And by the end of this, you're going to know exactly how to calculate it, exactly what it's hiding, and exactly why 2 investors can look at the same building and walk away with 2 completely different numbers, both technically correct. Let's start with a real scenario, because cap rate only means something once you attach it to an actual building. Picture a distribution warehouse on the edge of a mid-size metro area. 90,000 square feet. Single tenant, a regional food distributor that's occupied the space for 6 years. The seller is asking $12 million. The listing says the cap rate is 7.5%. That single number, 7.5%, is doing an enormous amount of talking. It's telling you, in theory, that if you paid $12 million in cash for this building, you'd earn 7.5% of that back every year in pure operating income. No mortgage, no leverage, just the building itself generating cash. But here's the thing nobody tells you when you're new to this. That number isn't handed down from anywhere official. It's not audited. It's not standardized. It's calculated by someone, usually the seller's broker, using inputs that someone chose. And the moment a human being is choosing inputs, there's room for the number to tell a story that isn't quite the whole truth. So let's build it ourselves, from the ground up, using this exact warehouse so you can see precisely where the honesty lives and where it can quietly disappear. The formula itself is almost insultingly simple. Net operating income divided by purchase price equals cap rate. That's it. 2 numbers, 1 division problem. The entire discipline of cap rate analysis isn't about the math. A 10-year-old could do the division. It's about knowing exactly what belongs inside that first number, net operating income, and what doesn't. Start with the top line, gross rental income. Our warehouse tenant pays $8.50 per square foot annually on a triple net lease. 90,000 square feet times $850 gives you $765,000 a year in rent. That's the revenue. That's the easy part. Now here's where it gets interesting, because net operating income has one job: to represent what the building actually keeps after the costs of running it, but before anything related to how you paid for it. That last distinction, before anything related to how you paid for it, is the single most important sentence in this entire explanation. Net operating income deliberately ignores your mortgage payment. It ignores your down payment. It ignores whether you paid all cash or financed 90% of the purchase. Cap rate is designed to measure the building's performance as an asset, completely independent of the buyer's financing decisions. 2 different buyers, one all cash and one heavily leveraged, should calculate the exact same cap rate on the exact same building, because their financing has nothing to do with what the property itself produces. So what does get subtracted from that $765,000? Operating expenses, the real recurring costs of keeping the building functional and insured, whether or not you happen to own it with debt or without. On a triple net industrial lease like ours, many of these costs are actually passed straight through to the tenant. Property taxes, insurance, and common area maintenance are often paid directly by the tenant, on top of the base rent. This is one of the things that makes industrial real estate genuinely attractive compared to, say, an apartment building, where the landlord absorbs far more operating expense directly. But net operating income still requires you to build in the costs that don't get passed through. Property management, even if it's minimal on a single-tenant industrial building, typically runs 2 to 4% of gross rent. Call it $23,000 a year on this building. A reserve for structural repairs and periodic capital items. Think roof sections, parking lot resurfacing, HVAC replacement on any office component. Commonly gets modeled around 15 to 25 cents per square foot annually, even on a triple net deal, because eventually something needs fixing that isn't the tenant's contractual responsibility. On 90,000 square feet, that's roughly $18,000 a year, conservatively. Add those together, $23,000 in management, $18,000 in reserves, and you're subtracting $41,000 from your $765,000 in gross rent. $765,000 minus $41,000 leaves you with $724,000. That's your net operating income. That's the number that goes on top of the fraction. Now divide it by the purchase price. $724,000 divided by 12 million. Do that division and you get 6.03%. Not 7.5, 6.03. Sit with that gap for a second, because it's not a rounding error. It's nearly a full point and a half of difference on the exact same building at the exact same asking price. So where did the broker's 7.5% actually come from? This is where cap rate stops being a math problem and starts being a negotiation. There are a handful of specific places where an optimistic number gets built, and once you know what they are, you'll spot them in almost every listing you ever look at again. The first is management fee assumptions. Some listings simply don't include a management expense at all, on the theory that an owner-operator might self-manage the property. That single omission alone can add half a percentage point to a cap rate calculation on a building this size, without a single number being technically false. It's just an assumption quietly baked into the presentation, one that may not match how you actually intend to own the asset. The second is reserves. Reserves for future capital expenditures are, by their nature, a projection rather than a hard historical cost, and projections are exactly the kind of number that gets rounded down or left out entirely when someone wants a listing to look stronger. A broker's pro forma showing $0 in reserves isn't lying, technically. A building might genuinely go a year without needing a major repair. But 0 is rarely the honest long-run average, and pretending otherwise is how a 7.5% number gets manufactured from a building that actually performs closer to 6. The third, and this one is subtle, is which 12 months of income get used. Trailing 12 months sounds like a precise, backward-looking, objective figure. But if a building had one unusually strong quarter, maybe a one-time expense reimbursement, or a period with unusually low vacancy across a multi-tenant property, a seller has every incentive to select the 12-month window that flatters the building the most, rather than the 12 months that represent its typical ongoing performance. None of this makes the 7.5% number a lie exactly. It makes it a choice. And your job, every single time you look at a cap rate on any listing, is to rebuild that number yourself from the actual rent roll and the actual operating history, rather than accepting the headline figure as a finished conclusion. Now, here's the part that separates someone who calculates a cap rate from someone who actually understands what it means. A cap rate, on its own, tells you almost nothing about whether a deal is good. It only becomes useful in comparison. Comparison against other properties, and comparison against the market's expectation for that type of asset. If comparable single-tenant industrial buildings in this same submarket with similar lease terms and similar tenant credit quality are trading at cap rates around 5.5% to 6%, then our building's true 6.03% cap rate looks entirely reasonable, priced roughly in line with the market, maybe even slightly attractive. But if the honest market range for this exact profile is closer to 6.5% to 7%, then even our corrected, more conservative 6.03% number suggests this building might be overpriced relative to comparable assets, meaning the $12 million asking price has room to be negotiated downward, or the deal simply isn't as attractive as the marketing suggests. This is why experienced investors treat cap rate as the beginning of a conversation, never the end of one. A 6% cap rate on a building leased to an investment-grade national tenant on a 15-year term is a completely different risk profile than a 6% cap rate on a building leased to a small regional operator with 18 months left on their lease. The number can be identical. The risk behind it almost never is.
This brings us to the single biggest mistake first-time buyers make with this number. And it's worth naming directly because it costs people real money every single year in every market. Treating a high cap rate as automatically meaning a good deal. A 9% cap rate sounds far more attractive than a 6% cap rate on the surface. But cap rate and risk move together, almost always in the same direction. A building commanding a 9% cap rate is, in nearly every case, being priced that way because the market perceives real risk in that income. A shorter lease term, a weaker tenant, a less desirable location, deferred physical maintenance, or genuine uncertainty about whether the current rent will still exist in 18 months. The higher number isn't a gift, it's compensation for risk that a lower cap rate building doesn't carry. Which means the real skill here isn't calculating cap rate correctly, though that matters. The real skill is asking what has to be true for this specific cap rate to make sense, and then verifying, line by line, whether those things are actually true or whether they're simply assumptions sitting quietly underneath an attractive-looking number. Let's return to our warehouse one more time and finish the story properly. At 6.03%, against a market range of 5.5% to 7% for comparable assets, this building sits right in the middle of fair value. Not a screaming bargain, not an obvious overpay. The real question for an investor isn't, is 7.5% a good cap rate? It's, does 6.03% on a building with this specific tenant, this specific remaining lease term, and this specific location represent fair compensation for the actual risk I'd be taking on? That question doesn't have a universal answer. It has an answer specific to you, specific to this building, and specific to what you're comparing it against. And that, more than any formula, is what separates someone who merely knows how to calculate a cap rate from someone who actually knows how to use one. If this helped make cap rate genuinely click for you, subscribing to the channel is the best way to support more videos exactly like this one. It costs nothing, and it's how we keep building these out. See you in the next one.